Good evening, and thank you for joining us with this evening's school board meeting. Mr. Romano, roll call.
Thank you. Mrs. Brinkman?
Present.
Mr. Rudy? Mrs. Delaney? Present. Mr. Schaff?
Present.
And Mr. Chumley has informed us he will not be present this evening. 4 present.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, next on the agenda.
Yes, it's us. It's a very short agenda with a very long topic. So, first of all, I just want to thank you, Board of Education, for, as we've kind of rethought like how we want to lead through this this school year, or this calendar year, 2021, is to every other time have some sessions that we're calling, these are work sessions, where we come together and just problem solve together so that you guys can get a deeper understanding of kind of where we are as a district. We can have more dialogue and discussion that's different than a regular business meeting. So we appreciate your, your willingness to do these formats. And what we plan on doing as of right now would be about every other meeting would be in this setting. And I think it really just kind of lends itself nicely to the more discussion of the challenges that we have ahead of us. And so, our whole team is here, the whole cabinet is here, and so even though they might be in the peanut gallery, they might be jumping in. We want you to feel very comfortable, jumping in, asking questions. So as much as we do have slides prepared for you, pause us if you need to pause us. We believe this will be about a 2-hour session, and we'd like to keep it to that to the best of our ability. And we just think that tonight you'll walk away with a better understanding of like where we are with teaching and learning, how our students are performing, and some of the challenges we have, and some of our next steps. So we just really appreciate it. So first of all, is the slide behind me happening? I guess I would see it up here. We're ready for the presentation. We're going to be on the purpose of this board work session. I have a couple bullets I just wanted to share with you here. So first, it's the February refresh, staying focused on our vision and mission. And so we're kind of doing this kind of reset across our entire organization. We've been doing it almost the entire month of January with the cabinet team. I met with the principals last week, and I'll be meeting with the rest of the DLT this week to really keep us on point, because it is so easy to be talking about distributing food bags. We talk about like what can we do to motivate the staff and keep them engaged, and before you know it, you're doing all these things that are like taking off the core business of teaching and learning, because there's so many needs and there's so many realities that we're wrestling with. And so I literally, when I talk about coming off course, I literally start moving my body for a reason, just to say like we have to have a moment where we kind of face our realities and just say our time is running out. We've got just X amount of school left, and we commit to excellence with every learner, every day, in every way, and we cannot afford to not maximize every single minute. And so that's what our February refresh is all about. So that'll be full of just staying on mission and purpose, and also celebrating, because we do have so much. It's so hard, especially in the winter months, to feel like you're making progress, to feel like there is hope and there's sunshine coming. And so we want to be really intentional. That's why we're having the Love WC week this month, and just trying to do some things among our staff to say, you guys are doing a great job. Keep up the great work, because we need you. We need you healthy, we need you strong, and we need you focused on the main thing. Keep the main thing the main thing. Another thing that I wanted to point out is, I always say words matter, and I feel like I made a mistake back in, I don't know, as we were like planning to open up school, is we kept using this word return. And so I want to call myself out tonight on that word return, and to say, truly, we never intended to return. Returning means going back to exactly how things were the minute we left on March, whatever day that was. And it's really not our interest or our desire at all to return to that moment, because we have higher hopes, we have higher expectations, bigger dreams that we want to get to. So we want to call that, instead of a return to where we used to be, we reopened. We reopened school, and we are so proud of our ability to be able to open the doors, have an option for students, both virtually and face-to-face, to do the very best we could, put our best foot forward to keep that learning going. And so I'm just going to say goodbye to return and get that thought out of our mind, because we are not returning to pre-COVID. We are trying to do everything in our power to bolster, improve, strengthen, so that we come out on the other side of this stronger and better than ever. Other words that I've used is revamp and reimagine. And I would say, it's been really hard. As much reopening takes so much energy, takes so much thought life, takes so much, day to day just to keep the gears turning. Your mind is, if we let it, every single cabinet meeting that we have would be about COVID response. It would be about the logistics of running this district. It would be all about spending hours planning what's the vaccination going to look like, and what are all the stations. And we would talk, every conversation we would ever have would be just about logistics, because it's that big and it can be that overwhelming. And we've kind of put a stake in the ground and say, okay, we're not just going to survive this year. We're not going to sit around and talk about COVID response every day. We're going to do it. We're going to do it well. But we have a bigger purpose that we have to keep in our forefront. And so that's why the whole revamp, reimagine conversation is something that we're trying to now take to the masses, I guess you could say. Now that everyone has figured out how to keep the gears turning, we want to make sure that our entire organization, our entire community is staying aligned and focused on our mission, that our head is up, we are on the rise, and that we understand what it means to continue to be on the rise. And that's kind of the point of today, and that's going to be the point of several sessions I'm going to be having with staff over the course of the next couple of weeks. So what are we going to do? Today we're going to talk about where we've been, and boy, do we have a lot to celebrate of where we've been, where we are. We have a lot to celebrate with where we are. We also have some, there's been some pain in that where we are, and then where we're going. We are hopeful for our future, and we want to stand here today with conviction and strength and energy and say, let's go, let's move this forward. What that's going to mean is that we've got to set the condition. As the leaders of this school system, as the Board of Education, working with the executive team, how do we set the conditions so that we can continue to raise the bar and close the gap in the school district? And it's a bar that we've continued to raise, and it's a gap, even though as much effort as we put into it, it's a gap that continues to grow. And so how do we get that in focus? How do we continue to stay there? Because we are all about excellence, and we want to make sure that it's for all students, the equity piece is addressed. And so what is very clear, and I will just admit right now to the world, is that we can't do this alone. This takes every ounce of our community, every stakeholder in our school district, everybody working together to keep moving forward. This is not about one person, this is not about one team. It's all of us coming together. So what I want to share is this district. It's hard for you to read these little bullets here because they look really small on that screen up there. But just remember, if you pause and think about what's been going on here the last 4 to 5 years. It is incredible. I know this timeline doesn't even reflect every bit of that work, but it's amazing to think what this district has overcome, what it has created, what it has endured, and what it has, we always say making lemonade out of lemons over the course of the last couple of years. And a lot of those efforts, as you read the bullets and you get more specific about the combining of the high schools, about the strategic planning, the Striving Readers Grant, the passage of the first operational levy in almost 2 decades, the attendance boundary changes, the new buildings, the returning, reimagining, revamping. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. A lot of those things on that list are really all about students, and they're about the learning environments, doing everything we can to enhance the learning environment. And this district has done a phenomenal job investing in that and being sure that when students come to school every day, that they have what they need in those environments. And we want to celebrate that. We also want to talk about what else there is on the to-do list when it comes to really being setting all the conditions so that student-centered learning can flourish in a school system. So I share this next picture, and I have this little visual aid here in front of me to get us to think about bamboo. I'm not a gardener. I love gardens and I love eating food and I love beautiful flowers. I'm not really good at it, but I love the kind of the metaphor that goes with it. And if you look to that picture on the right up there, you see an intricate root system. And what I want to talk about is here in West Clermont, when it comes to our focus on teaching and learning, you can't drive by the school and see the efforts that the teaching and learning team with the teachers and the principals have made all the time. It doesn't jump out at you like a new building, a new structure, or a new event. It's something that's constantly being worked in the ground. Little roots are growing all the time. And how bamboo works is that in that first year, you don't see anything coming out of the ground. We know a lot of soil has to be taken care of with nutrients. You've got to have water. You've got to have sunlight. You've got to have somebody to manage that. But you don't really see a lot of growth. Even with bamboo, you don't see a lot of growth in year 2. You don't see a lot of growth in year 3. But what you do see is what's up there on that screen with those roots all coming together, spreading out, connecting to one another, one by one, something is happening. Because when you get to that 4th, 5th year of bamboo growing, this thing goes from like a little bit of sprout out of the ground to 80 feet tall. And so what I want just to focus this on is sometimes in the areas of teaching and learning, you don't necessarily see everything like you can a structure, like a physical thing, or attend a program necessarily. It's a lot about people's mindsets. It's about new skills, new habits, new practices. It's about new resources. And I will say our team has done an excellent job chasing after grant opportunities that have come, chasing talent, and being able to attract and retain, and investing in just one little root system after another. And so what I truly believe here is happening here is wonderful things are being built underground in the area of teaching and learning, and it's going to pay dividends. We just have some more work ahead of us. We have some more roots we need to, additional root systems that we need to grow so that whatever we build can support that growth that is required out of that bamboo shoot. And so I have this here as just a memory and a reminder for us of how important it is. Just all these little tiny things have purpose, and they are going to continue over time to bring exponential growth to the school. And that's what we got to think about. Every effort has to have a reason, and it has to be intentional to this bigger cause or this bigger purpose. So thank you for this. What I want to do at this point now is to say, in the land of COVID, we've kind of lost our ability to have eyes and ears in the buildings in the way that we're used to. I don't think any of you have gotten to see what it's like in the day-to-day life of what our students are facing, what our staff is facing. And so what we thought we'd do is bring a really live person here, like a live teacher. And so Joe Stahl has joined us today. He is a 5th grade teacher at WT who lost power today for a little tiny bit of time, but They just, didn't miss a beat. That teaching and learning kept going there because they're amazing. And we all live to tell about it. What we have to realize is we just need to get a little like under the hood a little bit. Let's get a glimpse of what is the day in the life of a teacher, because what is real and what is true is that the impact of the teacher on the student learning is the number one thing. There is not a person in that mix that can impact student achievement like a teacher can. And so this is not to be teacher focused versus student focused. I'm saying to get to the students, you've got to have an eye on that teacher and how they're experiencing life and how you set all the conditions around them to help them be the best they can be. And Joe is an award-winning teacher in our school system. He is invested and dedicated to West Clermont as an alumni too, right? Yes. As an alumni. And so he's not here to whine, he's not here to complain, and he's not here to say poor me. He is here to paint a picture of what it takes just to get the lights on and to keep school going in the best fashion we can at this point. So at this point, Joe, I'm going to turn it over to you, and I just want to remind everybody, as he's talking, if you want to ask some more questions, he's ready. He'll be able to answer them.
I will attempt to answer them.
Right. Okay. All right.
To the best of my ability.
We know you will.
So when Mrs. Preston called me last week to talk, I was trying to figure out how to capture my day in a life. And I went home, I started talking to my wife, who also is a teacher, not here, but in another school district. And then my daughter, of course, had to interrupt me in the midst of it to bring me a beautiful picture she had created using some of her Christmas gifts that she had gotten. And it happened to be using a spirograph. And I don't know if you've seen one of those, but it's where you take the pen and you do all these little circles. And all of a sudden, it kind of resonated with me because I thought, wow, when you stand back and look at it, it looks like a beautiful picture because all these beautiful little circles come together and make this little flower that she put together. But then when you get into it, it's like all these messy lines. And I was like, wow, that is my day of my, like, that's what goes on my head. Everything is going different with every different which way that you can possibly imagine. But then from the outside looking in, it's like, oh, wow, you just have this beautiful picture going on. And so then I started thinking, how do I capture my day? And I kind of chunked it out into 3 different areas. One, with all the clerical pieces that we have to go through, because I get to school, obviously like most teachers, before school actually starts, because I have emails to answer, I've got phone calls to make, and the biggest thing that I spend a lot of my time is tracking the progress of my students and tracking the attendance of them. Because as they're being absent, or if they're quarantined, it's checking in on them. Are they doing the work? Are they meeting? Are we meeting with them? What do I need to do to get their access to the curriculum to make sure that they are learning? Because if they're not in our physical building with us, we're still teaching. The next day, if they're still not with us, we're still teaching. The next day, we're still teaching. So when they would come off of quarantine, if it is quarantine, they have to be ready to go right where we are. We don't have necessary time to go back and backtrack to possibly 10 days ago. And so a lot of that time is spent, where are they? Did they do the work? How are they progressing? Where can I intervene? Is the intervention there for me to figure out the gap that is missing? If there is a gap, what do I need to put into that gap? And this is all prior to 9:15, before students are starting to come in, before breakfast is taking place. And so then within all that tracking there, I have to also think, are students in the best spot in the classroom? Because, I mean, you can picture a 1950s classroom right now with everyone sitting forward in their individual desk. So we're in this 1950s room with a 21st century spin on it. And then if I take one student and I decide they're not sitting in the best spot and I need to move them, that takes 6 different forms for me to do, because we have to have seating charts for them to allow them to, in case there's a contact trace. So then I have to decide, do I want to go through 6 documents to get to the seating chart to move this student, which typically I do because it's what's best for them, and that's what they need, and I want to do that for them. But then I have to remember I need to go do the seating chart right away, because I would feel, I mean, if something would happen that day, I need for the contact trace to occur. And so then I go through my seating charts. And then kids are coming in and we're serving them breakfast in the classroom and handing out breakfast to everybody. And I'm lucky that, I mean, I did teach kindergarten for 12 years and now I'm in 5th grade, and I have to say breakfast with 5th graders is a lot easier than breakfast with kindergartners. So I am thankful in one way that I'm not opening 20 milks possibly. I did that for lunch, but 5th graders definitely are doable with their own breakfast. And so I'm able to pass out my breakfast, they're eating, and it's, personally, the breakfast in the classroom doesn't bother me at all. It's kind of nice to have a moment to sit down and chat with them very informally while they're eating breakfast. And I think it gives them time to see their friends that they haven't seen because they're on different buses, different things, and gives them that informal time to sit down and eat and chat like most adults like to do. And to kind of catch up on what happened last night, what happened this morning. And as 5th graders, you hear some interesting things too at the same time, and I'm learning a little bit more about TikTok and who's famous here and there. But so this is all before 9:30, and so then the day actually starts around 9:40 for us, and that's when all my instruction's taking place. And so even though I've done all this pre-time, it's now I have to present best practice scenarios, but also keeping kids safe with them almost by themselves to some degree, and making sure my quarantine students who possibly want to join in through Google Meets have that access. So I'm watching my camera and my computer over here to make sure that someone who's on quarantine needs access, I can help them, but also help the students in the classroom and teach instruction to them, and making sure I answer questions in that part, but also keep it innovative and fresh. Because if we do the same thing over and over and over, there is some, good things about doing some repetition, but at the same time, 180 days in, by the end of the year, if we were doing the same program every single day, you could just see like, great, we're doing this again. So I also have to figure out what new thing can I do with them, but in the back of my head, I have to also think, does this new thing allow kids who get sent home have access to it? Can they do it from home so they can continue to learn? I also have to think, does it allow kids to keep being safe and socially distance? And can they work together? Because in the end, I want collaborators, problem solvers, innovators, and that takes collaboration, kids working with things, but then at the same time, I have to make sure, are they safe? So I need you to separate at the same time, but I need you to get together at the same time. So if we're having groups, I need to make sure I know who groups are, just in case Johnny gets COVID or sick, who was his partner, and then I try to keep everything less than 15 minutes if they're partnered up, so that way it alleviates the whole portion of contact tracing. And so that's all going through my head during the time. So, and then at the same time, assessing their learning. Are they moving in the right space? Are they moving up? Are they continuing to grow? And then after the fact, taking a deep breath. And then in my building, the teachers switch classrooms, so our students don't move. The students stay in their one classroom, and then, so I go to another classroom to teach ELA and the science, so we all move that way. And the reason we chose to do that is then we didn't have to clean desks and sanitize in between classes. So I go over and then I sanitize another teacher's desk at the same time for myself to keep me safe. And that way, it was one surface to clean rather than 22 surfaces to clean, and possibly who knows what's happening in the hallway when we're moving 3 classes at one time. And so I switch classes and start the process all over again for another class. And so during that, then at the same time, if we have assessments going on, which I'm a believer in assessment, we need to know where students are, where they're going, what I need to do. Some of those assessments are one-on-one. Therefore, I have to think about where am I sitting with that student. If that student comes back, I need to sanitize that space. Every time that student leaves, I need to sanitize. Next student comes, I need to sanitize. And if I'm doing that, then I need to have the kids in the classroom on their devices working, but I have to watch how much time they're on screen time, because I want to balance technology, and I think technology is a great thing. I love it, but we do know too much technology is not a great thing. And are we turning our students into robots, or are we turning our students into thinkers, innovators, collaborators? And therefore, I have to really think about what I'm doing. Is it best for a device? Is it not good for a device? But if it's not good for a device, how do I get it to kids at home to allow them to have access to the curriculum? Because they need to have just as equal access, just as much as my students in person. And so, then with all that, I'm having to make sure Schoology is up and running, and kids know where to go within Schoology to allow them to get all the different materials and to know which class they're going in. And then during this, if a kid gets sick, then I have to stop everything, go over to my device and put in a nurse appointment. So the nurse can then contact us to then send them down, because there goes the quick little scribble, head down to the nurse. So I have to send out my nurse appointment, and then the kid's still not feeling well, when they call up, we'll let you go down. It's not that you saw me put it in. I want you to go down. I want you to be healthy. If you're sick, I want you to go home. I don't want you here. I would love for you to be here, but I don't want you here. But we have to wait for the nurse's office to open up, because we don't know what's going on down there. And then in the end of it all, it's just about the safety and health. Not for my own students, but for myself. I don't want to get sick at school, but then also go home and infect my own family. So I'm always thinking about the health and safety of our students. And there I'm thinking about the cleaning, the 6 feet space, and the mental health piece of it all. For my own mental health as a teacher, thinking there are moments I get home around 5:30 or so, and the thought of, like I said, I love technology, but sometimes it's like the thought of getting on a device just is like excruciating painful. I need a break from it. And I know for my students, I think for them, I know their mental health is needing to be checked in on, because, March 13th happened, and what they knew totally changed. And thinking back to what Mrs. Adams said about the return, I was kind of thinking that a long time ago, like we talked about return, what kids wanted to come back to school, but what they had to realize was what they were going to come back to was something totally different. And I was trying to have that conversation with my own children, that I know you want to go to school, and that's great. I want you to be at school. I want you to see your friends, but you have to understand what you're coming back to is not what you think you're coming back to. And so trying to help students understand that, and we talk about just our masks at school, and I try to empathize with them. I understand that the masks are not fun. I mean, sometimes they're very annoying, and when you're talking and you're trying to work with friends, you kind of want to, I mean, I've grabbed it a couple of times already, trying to, as you speak, and trying to empathize with them that we all don't like what we're in, but this is the situation. We're lucky that we're here, and these are the safety measures, and they're doing a great job with that. And so as the day goes, and we're having all this happen during our 7.5 hour day, then the day finally kind of comes to a close, and then it's about starting my day all over again at 4 o'clock, looking back at what we did get accomplished during the day, going back to the computer to see where kids were, where they were at home, contacting parents. I noticed that your kid hadn't logged on or something. I need to contact them, trying to see where they are. What can I do to help? Are you having device issues? Can I put you in contact with someone? So I'm doing tech support at the same time. And I mean, our tech department's great, and they're helping as much as they can, but you know, I think the teachers have that, you know, relationship with parents, that parents are more likely to hopefully talk to a teacher because their kids talk about them. There's that relationship piece. And so I'm calling home, sending emails, trying to touch base on what can we do to help you? Do you need something? Can I put you in contact with somebody? And going through work that kids have completed, so I'm grading, checking in, looking at progress, trying to decide where I need to go for not only the next day, but also next week, and where we're headed, and looking at assessments. And so my day kind of starts all over again, like everybody else, at 4 o'clock, but then also looking at what innovative things can I do to pull back in, what new things are out there to pull back in, to try to keep it all fresh for them. And so it's kind of like my world is, in the inside of my brain, it is a spaghetti mess. Somehow, if you walk past, people say it all looks nice and pretty, but everything that's going on is like every which direction you could possibly imagine to be ready. And like Mrs. Adams said today, our electricity went out at 1:15 today, and of course my lesson had to do with, we were working on our nonfiction performance task, and we were about to view this video and do a Padlet with the back channel going on, and they couldn't even log on, and I'm thinking, great, excellent. Which I will say, on the side note, I got observed this morning at 10:30 and the technology worked great. So I was thankful it did not happen in that moment. So this morning, my actual day started off with a pre-conference, but 10:30 it worked out, but then 1:15 I had to flip it over. It's like, okay.
So let's pause you there for a minute. You said you started out with the pre-conference. So that
Yes.
means your planning time was not your planning time.
Correct.
Your planning time was a pre-conference.
Yes, I met with Mrs.
And
Hall.
so,
for
like,
30
how often is that little bucket of time that we call your planning time dipped into for something else?
I would say out of 5 days a week, at least twice.
Okay.
And that's either with a intervention meeting, a parent conference, with a team meeting that we would have to meet with the three of us on my team with to discuss something that would be coming up. Sometimes it's a committee meeting for something for our building. So that typically at least twice a week it's taken out from 8:30 to 9:15.
So I'm going to jump in with another question. You were a kindergarten teacher last year.
Yes.
You're a fifth grade teacher this
Yes.
year. What osmosis thing happened to you to prepare you to go from kindergarten to fifth grade curriculum overnight? Like, do you get to talk to other fifth grade teachers? When does that happen?
For me, it happens when we make effort to talk. I email people when I have questions. Right now, I'm the only fifth grade ELA teacher. Some buildings have two, so they sometimes have a partner. For me, our team is on islands out there because we have a math teacher, a science social studies teacher, and then I'm the ELA teacher. And so
So you're like emailing somebody in some other school?
Yes.
Is what you're saying?
Yes.
So that
Or-
clearly doesn't happen during the day, like during your day? Like, you can't walk down the
No,
hall
that
and ask
is
them.
happening at night, sometimes
Okay.
at 11:30 at night when I'm laying in bed needing to do something. So I decide, let's email this person. Or it's emailing our literacy coaches to ask for some guidance, some questions that are happening. A lot of times I'll talk to our fourth grade ELA teacher. She's on an island by herself right this year as well. So I'll talk to her. She's been teaching fourth grade ELA for a while, so she has an idea of continuum, so I know what they were doing in fourth grade. And this year even more so, because we ended in March. I shouldn't say we ended in March. We did not end in March. We ended in May. But the live learning in person ended in March. Therefore, she would already understand some of the deficits that were already happening prior to that, and then what they were able to do March through May. So that was enlightening for me to kind of know what to do. I mean, we started with fifth grade curriculum, but as things were popping up, she said, well, that was taught during remote, so therefore you may need to look back and find the gap there.
So I know we're all exhausted and we're ready to go home after listening to Joe. Do you guys have questions for him, or just any comments as we kind of wrap up this part? Because you did a great job at kind of painting the picture, and it's one snapshot, one teacher, one grade level, but it's so reflective of the experience, and that really, no matter what grade level that you're in here or what position you play. So do you guys have anything you want to ask him while we have his undivided attention?
I guess I knew that things were happening, but not to that extent. So I appreciate the detail. That's incredible.
I would probably say if you have more questions, I probably forgot a whole other page of things I do.
You know, the board never gets into the weeds with the teachers and, you know, how they deliver curriculum. So, you know, let us get into the weeds for just a minute here to reflect on how you manage your day. That's incredible. I mean, very, very incredible.
I mean, I tell people the majority of, and I've said this like prior to COVID, that I feel like teachers in general, the majority of our time is spent teaching students, but really that's only 20% of our job, because I feel like the majority of our job is what's going on in my head, that's talking about where they are, what they're doing, the assessment. It's not actually the instructing of them at that moment, it's the reflective piece actually that spends about 80% of my time, because I have to figure out, reflect upon it, and then analyze it, and then think about it, and reflect more, and then plan further. But it all has to happen very quickly at the same time, too.
So the district's WOW days, how does that factor into?
Those have been wonderful, because it has given us a longer amount of time. Before, we had planning from 8:30 to 9:15, 9:20. And so a lot of times, sometimes it takes 30 minutes to finally get into something, and then it's like, bam, we have to go. So the WOW days have been really helpful, because I can spend longer time calling parents, emailing parents if I need to, collaborating with other teachers, collaborating with our team, diving into a lot of students who aren't doing work there. But then also on the flip side, when we have a WOW day, the following day, when we come off the WOW day, my planning time is spent looking back to see, did the students complete the work on the WOW day?
That was going to be my next question.
Comparing
Yep.
notes amongst the other two teachers. They didn't do mine, they did yours. Well, they did mine, they didn't do yours. Where does attendance factor out? Like, who did what? Where are they? Who do we need to touch base with? They did 2 of the 3, so why didn't they work on mine? Did something happen at that? So then we try to problem solve when we come off the WOW day, what happened on the WOW day when we don't have students checking in. But the WOW days have been really mentally healthy for me, because I know I have that time in a long period of time to collaborate, plan, and look. Because sometimes, like I said, when I get home, the thought of getting on a device to start thinking about looking for something new and innovative is very tiresome. And making sure I'm present at home for my own children. And that's been something I've been really working hard this year in general, not because of COVID, just I have 2 young children and I want to be present with them and not miss their life, you could say. So those days have been very, very helpful.
So how is a WOW day different from remote learning days? If we do like like we did after Thanksgiving or before Christmas? And
So the difference that the remote learning days that we were having after Thanksgiving, after Christmas, our students, and I can only speak for how our fifth grade team ran it. Basically, they ran their school day at home like they were at school. At 10:30, well, 9:45, they checked in for their morning meeting, and then they had their online cultural arts class that they would do. 10:30, then they would log on to, if it was my ELA time, they would log on at 10:30 with me for their Google Meet, and we would run ELA until usually about 11:10 or so, for about 30 to 40 minutes, and then they would have a little task to do to complete independently, but I would stay logged on. And kids who would need help would check in with me, and I would do that or whatever. And then at 11:30, they would go to their next class, so they would log on, go off my Meet, go into their class. I would get my next class come in, and I would start running that. And then during their lunch hour, recess hour, they had that off. And then during our skills, our tier 2 instructional time, they would log into their small group time at 3 o'clock and have their small group take place. So during the remote days, it was basically, they were at home sitting in front of their device like they would be sitting at school. And we were sitting in front of our devices. Instead of teaching or sitting here, it's like our Zoom meetings. On WOW days, what it ends up entailing is there's no Google Meets that take place. So usually the day prior, we kind of go over what they're going to be working on, and usually there's a video of us teaching. Sometimes we use a prior WOW day to videotape us doing a lesson or something, which also has to take planning, because if we do it too early, that could easily change in a heartbeat by the time the WOW day actually comes. So sometimes it happens, and sometimes you're erasing it the day before because you didn't get to it. And so usually there's a video of some sort of teaching or something that we have found that captures the essence of the learning targets that we want to do, and then there's some sort of assignment choice that they would complete that has to go with the learning that's taking place. For example, this week's WOW day for my class, we're working on a performance task all week. However, it could get thrown off if we have any snow days this week, which will change my plans. But if we're in session all week, on Friday, what they're doing is, by Wednesday, Thursday, they're working on an informational writing piece. So Friday, they'll be viewing a quick video on proofreading and editing, and then they will submit their piece, which is what we would have done live in class if we were at school on Friday.
So a question to you related to what you said. Are most of our teachers giving instruction for things to happen on the WOW days? Or are most of them using them for make up your work?
It's a combination. WOW days are usually prepped the day before, as he said, so it could be, the goal is that it's independent, that students would be able to log on there, and it's not like, hey, here, learn this new calculus problem that we've never even talked about. It's meant to deepen the understanding, practice, get some ability to do maybe something hands-on. So, but it's always prepped the day before. So it could be a continuation of a lesson, it could be rehearsal, practice, videos.
I would say most people don't, in our building, it's not necessarily shouldn't say review, makeup work. It's usually a continuation because we are so limited in our days. I think at first we kind of were going to use it that way, but when we realized we were having a lot more of them, when we're in content areas and everything,
You can't lose that time.
If we would not use it for review of what we're actually doing, if we just use it as makeup work, then we would be out 2 weeks of instruction, 3 weeks of possible instruction.
Gotcha. And I bet it's probably different at the elementary level versus the middle school level versus the high school level.
Yeah. Well, and again, I can't thank you enough for kind of representing your colleagues and painting this picture for us. I want to make a big point right now. I want you to hold on to, because you're going to hear it a little bit later from Ellie. From everything that you heard Joe talk about, what did you not hear Joe talk about? And Ellie's going to pick that point up a little bit later, but from everything that we heard Joe talk about, there were some major things that Joe did not talk about. So what were those things? So this is, it's a mystery. we'll hear when Ellie brings it up later. But it's significant, and I want to come back to it because it really speaks to the thought life of the teacher, where their efforts, where their energy, where their time, talents, and resources have to go in this era.
Can I ask one more question?
Sure.
And you may not be able to answer because this is your first year in 5th grade, right? So my question was gonna be, where would a 5th grade teacher be on February 8th last year versus where they are at on February 8th of this year? How can we compare where the students are last year or year before, where they are this year? I mean, not that we, you know,
Like if you had like a curriculum planning book, where would they be? Are they on track?
are they
or-
on track? No, I'm trying not to say on track because I
Like-
don't want us to focus on that they have to meet this goal by this date and that, you know, we get to where we need to be.
Yeah, but
But-
are you asking whether or not you've got through like lesson 15?
Yeah.
And that's where they usually are?
That's where they usually are. I'm not, and
So-
I'm not trying to,
So that's a great question. So this is what we'll often like rephrase when we're in a room like this. We'll say, is this about teaching or is this about learning? So if Joe had 80 lessons to get through and he is on lesson 70 right now, it doesn't matter where Joe is. What matters is, are the people that is in front of him, are they at lesson 70 with them, or do they get
Yes.
like in the dust? And so it's that, is it about teaching, is it about learning? And so what Ellie's gonna be able to is paint a picture of that gap, of like that February question you asked, of if we were normally on track in this way, are we on track in that same way, on
right,
target?
and I think that's kind of where I was getting at was, you know, in a normal, I don't want to call it normal because normal's out the window, but
Yeah,
pre-COVID, we would be teaching up to lesson 70, and most kids would be at lesson 70. You would have some stragglers and you'd bring them up, but, you know, with everything else going on, you might have not as many kids up to lesson 70. So the teachings had to, I don't want to say slow down, but adjust to make sure that everybody's where they need to be together.
yeah.
So I think that's where I was.
Yeah, Ellie will be able to paint some of that picture for you. So the pressure is now on Ellie to like pick right back up from after the dramatic narration of the day. And we appreciate it so much, and we will certainly give you permission to leave if you have things to do, but we would also welcome your presence because this is a conversation that certainly impacts your life and the life of the students that you spend time with. So it's really up to you.
Can I make a comment? We have often seen Mr. Stahl at our meetings because of his performance and how he's excelled in kindergarten. And he's received awards and all kinds of things, so we've been very happy and pleased to have you join us this evening, as we've in the past, and look forward to you receiving many awards for 5th grade. I'm sure you're going to excel there too.
Well, thank you.
He already is.
It's
There's
been a
no
learning,
doubt.
it's been a learning curve, but it's been a fun learning curve. I've been thrilled to make a change and learn and grow myself. Why I did it during a pandemic, I don't know, but I love where I am, so.
Do you have some of your students that you had in kindergarten?
You know, that's the most exciting part, is seeing them back as 5th graders and having the relationship with the parents and families to have them back, and it's been fun. Some I've noticed in kindergarten that I could have thought, yeah, I can see this happening in 5th grade for you, and I mean that in a good way. And then some, it's been nice to see where we started with you and how much you've actually grown across the 4 to 5 years.
Nice.
Excellent.
Good job.
Thanks again, Joe.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
And as you guys are listening to Ellie, I gave you like a little graphic organizer here that's broken down where you can make notes on, because it's just your own personal notes, on what's the current state of things, what's the future state, what barriers are you hearing they're getting in the way, what do you notice about our organizational capacity to change and do anything about those challenges, and then what are ideas for activating that you're kind of learning or picking up and think are important. So that's just kind of for your own thinking. So Ellie, you want to just pick up from there?
So this slide represents sort of the narrative of the story that we're wanting to share tonight. That, you know, we were, as a district, we had positive momentum going behind us. We are district on the rise, and then this little thing called COVID was quite the disruptor. And that disruption has increased the learning gap that exists for our students across the district. That squiggly line is just sort of like the new light that has been shown on
equity and opportunity for students. And we recognize that if we're to get back on track, not to return to what we were, but if we're to get back on the trajectory that will allow us to reach our board's aspirational goals, it's going to take significant effort and exponential growth to address those learning gaps in the ways that we need to. So some of that positive momentum that we had in place, you know, and it's sometimes hard to remember, like even where we were and what we were doing. It seems like so long ago in so many ways. But, you know, our district academic achievement was on the rise. State test scores, AP, end of course exams were rising. And, you know, state and national test results were showing that. We were in the middle of our implementation of a Striving Readers Grant, our investment in professional learning for our staff, really strengthening our knowledge of and our implementation of evidence-based practices and literacy. We had teachers coming together, forming instructional framework teams, participating in district-wide lesson studies where together they could come and learn and grow from and with one another. Our district's investment in multi-tiered systems of support, the capacity building of our district leadership team, a renewed focus on continuous improvement plans and continuous improvement efforts. We had high school team come together to help us clarify our vision for our graduates, and the seeds of our portrait of a graduate that will be unveiled later even this month were being planted and beginning to grow. We revamped our 6th grade student experience, participating in year-long empathy studies, really trying to learn more about students and their needs, and strengthening our ability to provide authentic and relevant learning opportunities for students. We made an investment in social emotional learning for our students, the implementation of caring school community across our elementary and our middle school, and our high school with its renewed sense and its sort of like revamping of pack time at the high school. And as you all have mentioned, teachers like Joe really represents what is best about our teaching and learning in West Clermont. And we have so many staff members who have become recognized not only just locally, but regionally at the state level and nationally. And that positive momentum and the things that we were able to do, I'll just note, like this came from the ingenuity of getting grants, through partnerships that we formed with businesses and community members of our community that allowed for us to have these one-time investments and a catalyst to continue that positive growth across our district. And so then COVID, and as a result, we had to make some significant operational and educational adjustments to respond accordingly. And if you think about for your own life how COVID has impacted your family, your work, your social life, those same impacts have occurred for our schools, for our staff, for our students, and it's required some significant adjustments. And if you think about, from a traditional standpoint, teaching and learning is our core business. That's in non-COVID times what really drives all of what we do. And we want to keep students safe within that learning environment. The pendulum has really swung where the driver isn't teaching and learning currently. The driver is student safety, staff safety and well-being, and trying to figure out a way to teach them at the same time. And so that adjustment has been significant. And so Joe really did a great job of illustrating all of those things that our teachers, that our staff are having to adjust, starting from just like flipping the switch in March of 2020 to teaching and learning in a whole new, in living rooms across our community to, social distancing and stop the spread protocols and hand washing and trying to figure out how do I simultaneously teach people who are with me and distancing and all of those things that have just, been challenging for us. and, you know, supporting problem solving on a whole new level, and in many ways having to make data-informed decisions without a lot of really good data. We didn't have, you know, test results from last spring that you know, would have given us an opportunity to really see the fruits of all of our labor. This fall, we didn't have computers in place that we would be able to utilize to administer many of the assessments that we would in the fall, and so it just lots and lots of challenges that we needed to do, absolutely, and we wanted to have our students return safely, but there has been an impact. And so it's really like, I feel like Joe was with us with the creation of this slide, because it's literally all of the thoughts going through a teacher's mind simultaneously, 24 hours on repeat. And that if you look at many of these questions, like these would have not been the questions that would have been running through a teacher's mind a year ago. Some of these questions wouldn't have even like been a question, because we wouldn't even know what we were even like thinking about or talking about. And so this like automatic, this like flip of a switch that has had to be made, that really is like, you can't underscore just how the cognitive load of, you know, juggling all of these things simultaneously has on our students and on our staff. So the learning gap, you know, what do we know about what that learning gap looks like for our students? So I mentioned a little bit that squiggly line, you know, kind of represents the opportunity gap and the equity gap. And, you know, this is really meant to, this data isn't necessarily, you know, something we're going to like dig into. It's really just meant to represent that both for our students that we have with us face-to-face and those in WCOA, because of COVID, we are learning so much more about every family than we ever knew before, where literally you have glimpses into people's living rooms. And we knew that equity and opportunity gaps existed before, but the spotlight has really been shown and has been magnified, those gaps that exist. And so things like, you know, being a diverse learner who has opted into learning in our WCOA, there are extreme challenges that come with that. Those are typically students who benefit most from small group instruction and from more you know, one-on-one small group learning environments that is really challenging to replicate in a virtual environment. On top of the fact that our reading specialists and our ESL teachers and our special education intervention specialists, they are supporting both students who are attending WCOA as well as those who are in you know, our face-to-face schools. And so just the, you know, as Joe was saying, like, all right, is this kid like with me, not with me, attending school, like in person, all of those things. It's like the same people. You know, we've been really fortunate to have been able to create this online school with very little or practically no additional funds, but the toll on that, and especially as it relates to our most at-risk diverse learners, has been real. So we know that when students come to us in kindergarten, there's a readiness gap. We know that around 50% of our kindergarten students come to kindergarten not on track and missing some significant you know, readiness skills. And so this year is no different as it relates to that. And the one thing I would just point out is, you know, we have about 120 less, this data represents about 120 less students than it has in the past. And so some of that is reflected in the fact that some of our kindergarten WCOA students you had to come to school to be given this assessment. So part of it is that, but part of it is that our kindergarten numbers are low. And so there are questions about what is that going to mean for kindergarten next year. So the readiness gap turns into a learning gap. And we know that research, all the research suggests that when students start behind, they're more likely to end behind and to not catch up. And so, you know, for our current kindergarten students who have started behind, they haven't made the necessary gains because of the COVID response realities of kindergartners having to learn how to get onto a computer and, learn how to read via, Google Meet. There are challenges, and challenges around not being able to bring small groups of students together. All of the best practices that we know about teaching and learning and we know about developing foundational skills for students are like run counter to everything that we're having to do because of COVID. And that just increases the learning gap. In first grade, these are students who were kindergartners last year. And, we don't want these students to become like the COVID kids, like that class of students or, class or classes that we just see march through our system that we feel like, oh, well, I don't know what we're going to do about that. It is critical and vital that we don't allow that to happen. We cannot let that happen. We have to address those gaps now to avoid those long-term, the potential long-term impact. And with our second grade as well, they were first graders. Like K2, as it relates to foundational literacy skills, is critical. And we have to take action because we know that by third grade, proficiency in third grade is key to future success for students. Not only in future success during their time in school, but future success beyond school. And so exponential gains are going to be required in order to close these gaps.
Can I ask a quick question?
Absolutely.
On the previous slide where you have first graders, why do you suppose our second benchmark numbers were lower than our first?
Well, in first grade, the measure changes. And so that is not only in our district, but across the nation. It's very typical of first grade. That's actually a decline that happens often because this is now where you're like making the switch to fluency and not just sort of like the isolation of discrete sounds and skills. But then the goal is that then by the end of first grade, you've caught that up. But that's something that as part of our Striving Readers grant and our other professional learning initiatives have really been geared around decreasing that as much as possible. But that's very much what we come to expect happening.
Because the rigor boot goes up, and the thing that you have to keep in mind is that K to 3 kind of journey, because everything kind of catches up by that third grade in terms of balancing out developmentally and kind of sorting through things. That the third grade is really the big indicator moment, and not that we don't use these as predictors. The third grade is the one.
That's a great question. Thank you. So, because we have not had standardized assessments, this is our first glimpse, and this is using measures of academic progress. It's called the MAP test that you're looking at here. But this is just our first glimpse of the impact on student achievement outcomes as measured by something that would potentially mirror or be linked to a state assessment. And so and I'm going to just kind of quickly go through a few of these slides. What really this calls attention to in my mind is that we know the learning gaps have widened, but where they've widened the most is we're increasing the number of students who have the most significant progress to make. So we're growing our our numbers and percentages of students who are most significantly off track, which means the gap and the gain is that much further to overcome. And that's true as we look at not only reading, but also in math. So this is our first kind of moment to really assess the significance of that learning gap.
And the reason that we get concerned about it is because you have to kind of put an asterisk next to all this data to say, this is reflective of who we can reach right now. There's some people who aren't taking the assessment. There's some people we are still looking for. There's all these gaps of we have more students, they're just not reflected in these numbers, which, you know, causes us to lean in and even be more curious.
So we include grade distribution here only because one of our pieces of milestone data, so we, all along these data pieces kind of represent the things that as a district we consider to be milestones. We need students by the end of first grade being on track with literacy. We need students in third grade being on track with math and reading. We need students in fifth grade and so on and so forth. And so one of those milestone data pieces at the high school level is looking at number of credits earned and needing students to earn enough credits each year so that they can, by sophomore year, if, you know, or so that by the end of their sophomore year, they would have earned credit. So if they chose to attend an OATS program, they would not be credit deficient and would have that opportunity. So that by the time they're junior and senior year, if they would like to participate in internship experiences and work-study related experiences, that credits wouldn't become a barrier to that. And so this is really for first semester, and you know, just calling out that, you know, 10%, and this is across all grade levels, you know, 10% of students had an F in across all of our courses in each of these departments, and another 3%, and again, this is like, those were averages, you'll see based on certain departments, higher percentages than others, but 3% had incompletes. And so that just triggers, you know, an alert to be thinking about the number of students who would be in need of credit recovery and potentially off track to graduate.
Can I ask a really, it's kind of a stupid, obvious question, but how do you get an incomplete?
So those are mostly from WCOA, and that relates to, we didn't want, because of how accelerated education is set up.
That's their
you-
curriculum, right?
Like, you can't, we didn't want students to like keep their course like open while then trying to start like a new course. So we wanted them to be able to like finish that out and then start their new course. And so we needed to like reflect that somehow in their grade. And so like giving them an incomplete was the way to do that. So once they finish, then we can go back and update that grade to reflect what they finished and then start. It's like the talk between Accelerate, which isn't, and our own like grading system and progress book, like that was kind of the handshake that we did.
Which means if they've taken a longer time first semester, it means they have a shorter amount of time to
Second
finish
semester.
the second semester courses, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So they're
Makes sense.
continuing their first semester work at the beginning of second semester
Yes.
until they get it done, and then they
Yes.
start
And
again.
then,
Okay.
yes,
Yes.
yeah.
There could also be some kids that were on quarantine right at the end of the grading session, so they, teachers would give them some extended time to turn some things in, or actually were positive for COVID. And the 1% number, I don't think is really, you're gonna have a certain amount of incompletes each semester based on
Random
kid
situation.
concussion protocol
Yeah.
or some other things that are taking place.
Yeah.
You want to give the student the benefit of the doubt to have a little bit more time. So, you know, students at risk for not graduating, like, that's significant. We don't want to have any students at risk of not graduating. But, you know, one of the things that's really challenging for us is that our ability, because we don't have resources, and those resources could they come in the form of, you know, a data infrastructure, like having the actual like tools to help us gather information and use it. Lack of resources as it comes to counselors who have, you know, double the number of students on their caseload. That ratio is, you know, double from what would be considered, you know, optimal or more ideal than what we have. Like, and the fact that currently, in order to get information about students and their pathways and whether they're on track or not, it requires like literal going into like every student's, you know, information to receive that information. It's just cumbersome, and when high school of our size, it becomes really challenging. And so that's something that that we want to be able to address. But this, you know, represents for our current 12th graders, those students who right now are at risk for not graduating. And we have plans in place that we're operationalizing, but it just goes, you know, it can't be underscored enough that, you know, these are challenges that we're facing. And, you know, student engagement, this is sort of the last of our district milestones, is looking at students' engagement, their involvement in and enthusiasm for school, and their hope for a bright future for themselves. And across the nation, we know, and if you listen to, you know, reports on the news and probably conversations with your, you know, neighbors or whatever it might be, that student depression is on the rise. Students are more anxious about their future. They, you know, this has impacted not just us, but them in ways that we're still trying to, we really don't fully understand the impact of that. And, you know, suicide rates, you know, have increased, and we really need to address, like, the needs of the whole child. And so just really, you know, wanting to not lose sight of the fact that this is a significant part of addressing our current reality.
So Dave, did that kind of get, we were trying to paint the picture of the gaps of like
Yep.
where we would have been. Did that do that for you?
It did.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Okay.
So Dan's gonna
Sure.
share
So
a little bit here with
speaking of the gaps, one of the things that we started to look into is, you know, what do we know about our finances? So where were there some costs? Where were there some savings? What additional funding did we get? What that was for? Where did the state cut back? This chart actually came from Educational Resource Strategies, which kind of was looking at whole big picture of where some of the finances were for school districts. And so as we look at it, you know, a couple things to note as we go from left to right with it. There was a cost, you know, impact to us with it. That first red bar where the cost of COVID is purely an estimate that really came from this study. You know, we'd have to, sometimes you really don't know what it was until afterwards, and then you look back and see what that was. Same thing with the second one, which is the district savings. Did we save some? Yeah, there were some things that we didn't have to spend money on, and so we're sorting those things out. Those two numbers actually came from the study. As we go forward, there's some numbers that we know of, and this is all on a per pupil basis. We received about $140 per student, okay, on the first ESSER funding that they gave us. That primarily was used to put a device in everybody's hand, okay? Mind you, what the Fed was telling us, what the Department of Ed was telling us, and how we could use that money, mainly was for continuity of services. You can spend that money on anything that was COVID impacted, but really, you know, the bottom line is to keep continuity of services with that. You go to the next bar over, that's the most recent ESSER announcement, which was to this district about $4 million. So in the announcement to us, it said about $377 per pupil, but in essence, that was really if we educated all the kids in Clermont County, okay? So that's how that was distributed to us. So that's about $500 per student. We don't know yet what we're gonna spend that money on, okay? That's money that is given to us. We can spend that money through 2023. You go over to the right on the CRF funding. The first one was a little bit over $400,000. We spent that money. A lot of that was to make up for that first red block, okay, with, you know, the personal protective equipment, training the staff how to clean and disinfect, you know, and really how to prepare the classrooms and that for us. The $24 on the CR for broadband, okay, if we're gonna put a device in everybody's hand, they gotta be connected, right? So how do we make sure that those that didn't have that ability now have that ability to do it? The state cut us, okay? They cut us in FY20, they cut us in FY21. They came back and reduced the cut for FY21, but that's real dollar loss of about $300 per student, okay? That's the red block that's going down. The governor encouraged the Bureau of Workmen's Comp to look at their reserves, any excess funding that they had, distribute to schools, and actually distribute it to all employers within the state, okay? Two things about that number. I only included the most recent one in December because historically we have been getting rebates and dividends annually, okay? My concern is that fund, there was 3 distributions in 2020, okay? Equal to about 5 times what the premium was, okay? Now you're depleting those reserves. I don't know what that means in the future if we're gonna get those dividends or rebates in the future, okay? So, plus and minus. But here's the big thing that, I think, you listen to where Ellie was going with everything. There's this new gap caused by COVID, okay? We already had one. This is on top of it, okay? That's not our district number. That's, again, an estimate by this study, okay? It's an average, okay? Part of what we need to do is assess where we're at. What are the strategies that we need to do to remedy that, and what are those going to cost us, okay? Here's the other part of that story. From that first red, -875, until the last one of Bureau of Workmen's Comp, those are one-time onlys. We don't know how much and how long that last gap is going to cost us, okay, where that's going. That's an estimate. The estimate in the study was between $10,000 and $12,000 per student over a 4 or 5 year period of time. That's how we got to 2,500 to break it down, okay? But that is kind of what we're looking at through that gap. I'm gonna add one more thing that's not on this chart, okay? This is all new from COVID, but we still have to go back and understand, and we talked a little bit about it at the retreat, okay, is what were the things we were already doing without? What were some of those core things that this district, and you'll have to excuse me, but I've heard the term lean, okay? And that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people, okay? But is our lean, does that mean we were efficient? Or does that lean mean that we were just really doing without? If you think in terms of health in your lean, how close were we to really being malnutritioned as far as, how we do our expenses, okay, to do it? So that's something we need to consider, because that means that that last bar, okay, is really greater than what may be projected. That's a reality that we have to go with, okay? And that's, I don't mean to be negative, but it's a reality, because part of what's coming, what are those strategies that we need to be about, okay, to correct that gap, to put us back on track, to keep those aspirations that the 5 board members led us through, because we haven't given up on those. Those are still out there that we're moving towards. Questions on that chart?
Thanks, Dan.
So, what does all of this data show us? So Dan kind of alluded to this a little bit, but our pre-COVID, reality of going without core resources has been magnified by COVID. There is an impact and a cost of that is just greater now than ever before. And all along, we've known that there are these inequities and holes in our support systems, that those equity and opportunity gaps existed, but they're now more noticeable than ever before. Our core business is teaching and learning, and COVID has compromised the amount of time. Time is finite. We can't manufacture, Lord, I would love to figure out a way to manufacture more time. We can't do that. And so, COVID has compromised the amount of time that we can devote, whether it's individual teachers, staff members, principals, you name it, across the organization. It's compromised that time we can devote, and it's forced an imbalanced focus on operations over instruction and education. And that ultimately, we still don't know the full impact and the ultimate impact on COVID. We have an understanding now, today, that's different than what we even understood a few months ago, but there's still yet a lot to be unknown. We know the impact is negative, like there are negative impacts of that. We just don't know how significant at this point.
Well, and the things that Joe was not talking about, and that Ellie was kind of reiterating as she talked about the teacher experience, is that a lot of the actions are all related to these operational things, and the thought life is there. I mean, Joe is saying, I'm working toward best practices, they didn't talk about, and I have this many English language learners in my class, this many students on an individualized education plan, this many people on a 504, this many people who are raised by somebody other than a parent, possibly a grandparent or an aunt or an uncle. Like, he didn't give that makeup. And usually, like, when you're thinking of your lessons, you're thinking, how do I get this lesson through to all these different styles or whatever? Well, less time is able to be thought of around that, because he's trying to figure out, okay, I need them to collaborate, but I can't really collaborate because then I'm going to be, and it's that whole, like, he's pulled in directions, like, every day. And so when your thought life is always in that battle, you're not closing gaps, you're just keeping the motors running. And I don't say that in a disrespectful way at all. It's just, it's where your time and thought life and where your efforts have to go just to keep everything churning forward. And we just can't underestimate it, is why we just keep emphasizing it. Done.
Well, and yet, we recognize that we are in a much better position today than we ever could have been. Like, I don't even want to imagine, none of us want to imagine where we would have been had our community not supported the passage of our levy. And we cannot forget the, like, Herculean efforts that it took. And, you know, it's not funny, but, like, even the governor trying to, like, keep us from getting this thing passed by not letting people come and vote in person, and all of the things that it's like we've, like, forgotten that even happened. But, you know, we are still so grateful for that, because we know that our current reality would just be unimaginable. And yet, it's like as soon as we, like, climbed that mountain, we didn't even get a chance to, like, really celebrate before we recognized just how many more mountains there were to climb. And COVID has, for sure, made those mountains, like, snow-covered with, you know, avalanches and boulders, like, complicating every effort. And, you know, you know, it's now, like, trekking through ice and all of the things. But, you know, we recognize that the challenges still exist, but we know we can do hard things because we've done hard things. And so when you just take a moment to, like, take a step back and to recognize all of what has happened in the span of less than a year, it is remarkable. And it is, like, if anyone were to have said, like, hey, West Clermont, how about you figure out a way in you know, the span of, like, a week or so to take everything that you do face-to-face in a school building and just, like, do it from home and, like, have everybody else at home and all the kids at home. Why don't you just go ahead and do that? And on top of that, we'll, like, add all these other things to this list. Like, that's what happened, and that's what we did, and that's what our teachers did, our students did, our family did, our community did. And, you know, if we're to just, like, take a look at and remind ourselves, because I think it's easy to, like, look at the gaps that exist and to see those mountains we still have yet to climb, but we have to take a minute to, like, reflect on the significant work that has occurred to get us to this place. You know, we have teachers, like, figuring out how to grow professionally in new and different ways. We were able to, like, put a device in every student's hand, give them a way to, like, sign on with Clever with, like, a badge that they, you know, put up to their computer screen. We've made investments in digital tools and supporting staff and trying to use them. We've changed master schedules. We've provided food and Wi-Fi and connected families with community resources to ensure that their basic needs were being met. We found ways, even through this, you know, crazy time when every district in the entire state is, like, trying to find ways to keep school going face-to-face, we've secured additional subs for our district, and hiring building subs, and then being willing to look for third-party, like, contractors, like, trying to find ways, anything and everything that we could do to keep students with us face-to-face. We, you know, in the middle of all that, like, I don't know, reopened, like, Clough Pike Elementary and building, like, a field house. We've figured out new ways to collaborate together and launched design teams to help us work to accomplish the goals that we've outlined in our roadmap to success. You know, again, because like, why not? No better time than the present. We've transitioned our teaching and learning team from being a curriculum instruction team and a special education team to a more integrated and aligned team. And that's meant things like new tools for how we write IEPs and how we communicate that information with families, how we communicate with families around student absences and like sending text messages through Remind. Joe mentioned like everybody's eating breakfast in the classrooms across our elementary and middle school. Like, sure, let's throw that in the middle. We figured out how to do teacher conferences, parent-teacher conferences digitally, and I'll note, have higher percentage turnout. And so, like, and on and on and on. We're figuring out ways for students to remain active in extracurriculars and athletics, something critical to their emotional, well-being. So like the list goes on and on and on. And so we know we can do hard things. We're not afraid of challenges. And this is a challenge we can overcome. And we will overcome. And in order to do that, like, we know there's some questions that we're going to have to answer as it relates to next year. Like, we don't know yet, but we know we will have to know, and we'll have to answer, like, what are our operational realities going to be for next year? Are we, like, still mask wearing? Are we still social distancing? Are we still, sanitizing? Like, all of those questions still remain unknown, but soon they'll have to be known.
Well, and I think there's confusion around it, especially with the vaccine and the good news of that coming and the great fortune that we have of being in the 1B category of, okay, we know we're not at the beginning of this thing, and we know we're not at the end of it, but where in the middle are we? Are we in the beginning middle, the middle, or the end middle? Like, that is unknown, and I don't think anybody can put a date on that. And so, sometimes the thought of the vaccine is like, oh, well, everything will just kind of settle back in after that. And all the protocols, all the steps we've been taking up to this point will continue, throughout the school year. And so, and what does it mean for next? And so that's really where we are. Are you guys what are you hearing in your industry? Like, as you plan for the next fiscal year, are you guys hearing anything as you're kind of wrestling with these same things in your own world?
I'm in healthcare. Things the way they are now are probably going to be the way that they will maintain, because it's a standard of healthcare now, for patient safety. And had we thought about some of these measures 20 years ago, we probably would have put them in place. Just I don't know, it's much different, but it's an environment that's very much embraced by the patients, their family members. I can't see us going back.
Yeah, I think I'm also in healthcare, but I'm a behind-the-scenes person versus Mrs. Brightman's more front and center. But I think there's that unknown about the vaccine. There's everyone that wants to get it, great. Everyone that doesn't want to get it, great. Well, is that going to solve the problems? Are we still going to have a large population that doesn't get the vaccine? Or, are they, how's that going to affect things? And, we don't know the longevity of the vaccine. The vaccine is, we're very fortunate to be in the 21st century, and having the ability and the technology and the knowledge to fast track vaccines, and there's treatments that are getting fast tracked, and the research is going on out there to get them done. But we're still kind of in that we're going to be in the guinea pig stage. I mean, it's kind of like I associate it to when the chickenpox vaccine came out. When my son, he was a toddler when it came out, and I'm like, oh, well, I'm not going to do that. But then I'm like, my daughter, it was different. It's like, they knew more information. And I think, as we grow as a, as a country and as a society, internationally and nationally, that, we're going to get answers to questions. But unfortunately, we just can't, wave our magic wand and get them, because it just has to kind of go go through the whole, the lifespan or the timeline of what's gonna happen. I mean,
Well, and that's why, like, based on what you're saying, is like, there's some ways we're never gonna go back. Like, some people have this sense of, well, we'll just get through this day, and we'll just get through this week, and then we'll just get through this month. And it's like, no, this is it, this is us. And so how do you maximize, every moment? How do you continue to close those gaps and not just say, well, you know, we'll get to that next year when our masks are off our face. The time is now.
And for our business, we are direct patient care. And we're coast to coast, north to south, from Alaska down to Florida or whatever, Texas. We have 70 surgery centers, we have 15 small hospitals, and another 36 physical therapy. And our rate of immunizing our staff is at 64%. How is that helping society as a general if your healthcare workers aren't vaccinating at a higher percentage? Will we ever get rid of the masks? Because if we don't get them vaccinated, we're not gonna eradicate the disease.
Yeah. So we as a team want to continue to build that hope for the future and keep planning, but also being really realistic about where we are and how we need to roll up our sleeves right now. So there's other questions that we plan on answering and they have some timelines to them.
Yeah, so thinking about summer, and, you know, as Natasha was saying, like, we recognize, and Joe was alluding to, like, we don't have a moment to spare. We don't have a day that can go by that we're not using it to support student learning. And so what does that mean for how we can maximize summer? And what does that mean for instructional models for next year? And really trying to capitalize on the time that we do have.
Well, and you guys are asking some questions about that, about how the days look. What does a remote day look like, Joe? What does a WOW day look like? What's a normal day look like? It really is a lot to question and to really analyze, because the reality is, and it's like, how much capacity is inside of Joe? Joe's a learner, a grower, a lifelong, like, I'm gonna continue to innovate and take my classroom to the next level. But how much room is there in there? Like, there's only so much capacity. So when you look at the conditions, the amount of time that Joe gets to plan, the amount of time Joe gets to collaborate with colleagues who also teach 5th grade ELA, for the amount of time that he gets to collaborate with his intervention specialist who helps to support diverse learners. Like, when you look at all the conditions, it's like Joe's doing about all Joe can do with the certain conditions that we have right now, with the time that we have, the resources that we have, and the whatever. So I don't know if I would use the word everybody's maxed out. That feels so extreme. But I feel like everyone's maxed out in the certain current conditions. And so that's what we keep wanting to question is, what conditions can we change so that it can free up some bandwidth in Joe to continue to take on these challenges and keep taking the instruction to the next level. And I use Joe as our, you know, the
But not everybody's at the same level as Joe. You've got people that are on their
who just walked through the door this year,
they've got a lot of energy.
who were interviewed on Zoom.
30 years.
Yeah.
They're at a different level of energy.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And patience and tolerance to all of this.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes, and so when somebody's trying to figure out an app and you're telling them, you can't just say it louder and then they figure it out, right? So this isn't about like saying something louder or more intensely, like we have to do it differently. We have to show a different way. We have to provide a different way, and that's what we're really pushing ourselves to say. And that's why these design teams exist. That's why we're doing everything we're doing, is to say, okay, we're kind of maxed out under these conditions. How do we change the conditions to get a different result? My mom always says, you know, if you always do what you've always done, you always get what you always got. Well, we can't be in that mode at all. We reject it.
Yeah. So, you know, thinking about what is that going to mean for WCOA next year? Like, how is that going to evolve? You know, we had to just overnight, literally, like, get this thing up and running. And so what can we learn from what's gone well about that? And what areas we'd like to improve moving forward.
I think back to when we first mentioned WCOA, one of your first questions, Mr. Schaff, was, are we going to keep doing this? Like, this could really be like an option for people. And so now we're really in that phase of, all right, is this really an option for people educationally? Is this an answer to something about safety? Is this going to help us get more people through the finish line, having the skills, mindsets, talents that they need? Or is this people checking a box to say, check, I did that, but not really getting the fullness of like what a West Clermont education should look like? So we have to ask all those questions, and we invite you to ask those questions with us because, you know, we're kind of at a fork in the road. Do you cold turkey end it on arrival, dead on arrival? Do you morph it? Do you, I don't know, blow it up is not really the right word, but do you just continue to iterate on what is?
Well, and it's directly connected to like operational realities for next year. When you look at, you know, the reasons that most people chose it this year, it was because of COVID realities. So not fully understanding what that's going to look like for next year is potentially also directly connected to what that may look like for next year as well. You know, knowing that our most vulnerable learners are, you know, most vulnerable in this time, you know, how do we strengthen our continuum of services to really be able to meet the unique and individualized needs of our students? Like really needing to understand what can we leverage and how can we invest to make the biggest impact. When you look at you know, research, we know that lots of things have a positive effect on student success and student outcomes. But we can't afford to do things that just will like incrementally move the needle and get us like a little bit closer, you know, every day. We're beyond that. Like we really need to maximize the impact of everything that we do and to be very smart and being able to leverage those things that will have the highest impact and make the most success, or to impact student success in the greatest ways possible. So, you know, it's urgent, just like it was urgent when we, you know, last March for us, it became urgent for us to find a way to get every student a Chromebook because virtual learning is impossible without a device. It is urgent in that same way that we, as Natasha has said, that we create the conditions that allow for us to more deeply implement our district's roadmap for success. And so thinking about, you know, anything from summer programming to providing curriculum for our teachers, giving them the opportunity to participate in professional learning opportunities that build their capacity, investing in our students and our staff, figuring out ways to continue to innovate a student-centered learning experience, increasing mental health supports available not only for our students but for our staff. You know, all of these things, it's urgent that we address them. We know what to do. We just need to ensure that those conditions exist for us to be able to activate on that. And so it really is an investment in, you know, we've sort of alluded to these things through various conversations tonight that we're missing some of these foundational bricks. And, you know, and Dan sort of talked about like the difference between lean and, you know, like maybe malnourished. But, you know, the idea that it's okay to do without is something that we can't, we just can't operate with that moving forward. We're already, it's already caught up with us, and it's going to continue to impact us in greater ways as we move forward.
So as you guys look at this bulleted list, we kind of have, in the urgent action slide, it's kind of some global big bucket kind of topics. You see it get a little bit more precise, a little more detailed in the bulleted list on the foundational structure slide. Is there anything that as you're looking at these slides, anything that you think is like a missing piece? It's like, well, not only do we need social, emotional, mental health, counseling supports, we need X. Just from like being a community member, being a parent in the district, just like that perspective outside of us, because you know, as educators, we know best practice and some, you know, some levers to pull from a research standpoint, from what experience has taught us. Do you feel like when you look at it from your vantage point that you see something as a big gaping hole that we haven't like bulleted or considered here?
only thing I can think of is something along of student opportunities. Making sure that the curriculum that we're providing is of interest to them. I'm not talking math, science, English, because that's not of interest to many of our students. But I'm talking about the electives and things like that to make sure that we're providing them with relevancy and interest.
Thank you.
Yeah, like maybe, survey the students. I mean, you always ask a child, especially in elementary school, what do you want to be when you grow up? Well, maybe we need to ask them that in 6th grade. We've expanded that, that 6th grade experience so that it's welcoming, comforting, adjusting. Maybe we ask them then in 6th grade, what do you want to be when you grow up? Because, they're past being a fireman and they're past being
An MBA, like.
an
right?
MBA
Yeah.
star.
A
yeah.
YouTuber.
Yeah,
Maybe
That's
not
like my
past
own
that.
children.
All those things that, yeah. And then maybe, we go again in 9th grade when it's like, it's real then. I mean, you've got 4 years to get everything you want to do in your resume to go to your next phase in life, whether it is to go to the workforce or to the military or to college or whatever it is, and look at those results and say, hey, okay, well, you know what, we don't need all these extra drama classes. Maybe we need more biomedical science or more this or that, or, the kids that you can tell that, they're not going to go to college, that they would rather, or that they would be best suited to go to the Oaks so that we can focus them on checking the boxes they need to check so that when they get to the Oaks, they can take all of that extra curriculum that's available to them instead of having to concentrate on, well, they missed their language arts credits, they missed their math credits, they missed that, so that they can be the best version of themselves when they get to walk across the stage.
I hear both of you just like crying out for we need more student voice in all this. And so maybe that's something that we could do for you guys at one of our future meetings too, is just to try to get that student voice at the table in the way we were able to get the teacher voice at the table. I know you're meaning it on a grander scale, this should be part of practice, but I think that it could help kind of illuminate. Because I will tell you, there's some kids, as you watch a classroom, especially in that, that middle school to high school, of them what is the point of this? You can just see it all over their face in new ways than you might have seen it before. That relevancy question is more relevant than ever when it comes to what are we doing all this for? This has to be for a reason. There has to be some light at the end of the tunnel.
Well, another thought on that would be to possibly do some kind of an exit interview on recent grads, not freshmen, but maybe sophomores in college or military, to ask them, where do we miss the mark? Where do we fail you on preparing you for what you're doing now, so that maybe we don't keep making that same mistake, and better prepare kids to college, career, and military.
Okay.
Or even doing that even within our own ranks. Ask a 7th grader, what could we have done when you were in 4th, 5th grade to prepare you for 6th, 7th grade? What could we have done if you're a 10th grader? What could we have done when you were in 6th or 7th or 8th that would have prepared you better for
High school.
9th and 10th?
Okay, thank you. That gives us some ideas. David, did you have anything else that,
So the things that just jump out at me on this list is COVID has been, as you said, is the dominant thing. And pre-COVID, when you talked about student safety, we were talking about door locks and security people. And my fear is that we don't lose sight of that, because we don't want to be the next school shooting that's going to happen in the coming years, and that we're prepared in that. And then also in the same light, at my own work, there's a big emphasis on knowledge management. So the workforce at the IRS is old, getting older and retiring and moving on. How do you capture the knowledge and be able to pass it along to the next generation that are coming in? So how do we prepare for the next pandemic? Because it's not going to be another 100 years before the next pandemic happens. You know, how are we prepared for the next time that we have to go virtual on a dime? You know, when we're back to more pre-COVID than before, I mean, than we are now. Are we ready to, to tackle this in a way that we weren't original?
One, you're speaking to who are you attracting to come in the district? How are you developing them and welcoming them once they get here? How are you building their knowledge base? How are you making it attractive enough for those person to want to stay around and not just like hop to the next lily pad? And I mean, that's kind of that whole infrastructure there that it plays into, like when you're lean and malnourished, are you
Right.
doing those things to just keep strengthening and do that institutional knowledge? And everything can't be by osmosis when you move from grade level. Like how's Joe supposed to switch from K to 5? And sometimes, Joe's, how many years have you been doing this now? We'll age you a little bit.
18.
Okay, so we've got first year and second year teachers that we say, okay, here, flip on this. And he has a knowledge base to at least draw from that makes him exponentially more successful out of the gate. So that safety thing came up, and I'll mention and make sure Lance is back there paying attention to us. Just there were certain things in COVID safety land where you're like putting, you just imagine these gallon jugs of like huge vats of hand sanitizer that are like flammable, so it's like a lot of times you have to weigh out like safety versus safety, capital S, so it's like we were constantly like torn in those kinds of, what's the best way to do this?
Well, and with all of this, we can't fix these things with Band-Aids when it requires like super glue, or we can't build homes out of straw when we really need bricks with mortar and foundations. And, that's just where we are.
Well, and I think it's, it actually, what I was just saying, I'm probably stealing your thunder here, but
That's okay.
we can't always think about doing business as usual, as we used to do it. And that it's, you have to be innovative and ahead of the curve. And that's what I love most about our team is that, and I think, that hopefully you guys, the team feels that they have the ability to think outside the box and, it's how, use whatever resources we can to make things happen, and that it's, there's not as much restriction right now in thinking about, how things could be done better. There's things I want to say that I can't say, but, it's, is school, is school one building from start to finish? Is it a mix of things like that? Anyway, go
Well,
ahead, I'm sorry.
and to that point, I think we've discovered through this that things that we previously thought were outside of our ability to impact, we've learned we really do have an opportunity to impact them. We can think differently about things we thought previously were like untouchable and just part of the fabric of like what it means to do school. And so I think that's, part of where you're going with that a little bit is that we have to continue to reevaluate and to reassess and to reimagine. And in doing so, it's going to take, an investment in our people and our resources to just, like right now, I feel like we're doing all of these things with like two hands tied behind our back. And yet doing that, like we've been able to accomplish the unimaginable. And so imagine if we have the opportunity to like untie those hands and create some conditions that can allow our teachers to do the things that they're trained to do with just a bit more foundational pieces in place. Like, we know that that this district could be just like off the charts, that we can relentlessly pursue opportunities for all of our students, and that, you know, our staff, already the things that they do in spite of all of the challenges that face them is remarkable. And so to remove some of those barriers for them, and to build that, like, put those bricks, some of those foundational bricks in place so that they're standing on bricks and not like standing on, you know, like a water bed or something, you know, is just going to make that climbing that mountain that much more possible. And we know, because we have done like the impossible, that that really we can do anything that we put our minds to, and we know the things to do. We have the people who are willing and able to do them. And so, like, the future really is bright here. And so we don't want this to like be woe is me, doom and gloom, but it really does need to be like a reality of the work that we have to do, but a commitment that there is hope for the future. And like, hope for the future is like power and fuel in the present, and that's where we want to spend our time and our energy and our efforts, in reminding ourselves where we want to go, and supporting us and being able to move in that direction. So.
Well, I know one of the things that comes to my mind, as far as one of the things that we started doing this year, we brought with Joe, was WOW Days, and something that, you know, and I'm sure that the state isn't going to be as relaxed, you know, next year or the year after as they've been, as far as, you know, attendance and things like that. But I mean, you know, incorporating WOW Days into the schedule, you know, whether they can count as attendance days, or, you know, do we need to expand the schedule a little? But I think that we've learned that, you know, WOW Days have become extremely useful as a tool to help the teachers in their planning, and the fact that we're limited by how much planning time we can give them to begin with, and, you know, using that as a tool. So.
Should we check in with Mr. Rudy to see?
Yes, I looked up and saw him a second ago, but he was like a little dot on the screen. Can you hear us, Mr. Rudy?
Yes, I can.
Do you want to weigh in?
I don't know. It was just such an overwhelming, but good overwhelming presentation. Really made me think about my own job, my own life. I just think everything's headed in the right direction. I understand the problems, and I hope that they can be overcome.
Thank you for that. We run a lot on encouragement. It helps us motivate us, that's for sure. The image of Ellie, like, holding her hands folded and tied, I mean, that's such a good image, I think, for teachers sometimes. And we can't just say, you know, try harder, pull your hands apart, like, keep trying, keep trying. You can't keep doing the same things you've done. You got to change the conditions. There has to be a way to cut that cord and get those hands free. And that's the thing that we're committing to right now. The plans that we're going to be bringing forward to you are meant to say, these aren't the plans we've always done. We're continuing to build those roots, continue to build that system. Every little thing we do has purpose, but we just can't say, open your arms and something magical happens. We've got to change what we're doing. And so that's what we're committed. There are some pain points here. There are some realities about student performance. And we've got to knock those barriers out of the way.
And I believe it's key for everyone, not just us in this room, but we just have to keep our lines of communication open with our students, with our staff, with our community, most importantly our community, because I mean we're the spokespeople for the community, and if we can take this information and continue drilling it down, getting that grassroots effort in, I mean that's why we were successful with the levy, because we, you know, we put it all out there, and, you know, we have a great foundation with that, and, you know, this is the next thing that goes on that foundation. If we keep educating everyone and letting, you know, everyone know that, hey, we're listening, we're trying to make a difference, I think it'll go a long way to making it possible. And
Absolutely. That's the last slide. It says together. Isn't there another last slide?
There is.
Oh, you stopped. Yes, here we are. Together, oh, sorry. I thought you were about to go. Together as one community. I mean, this is not a one-man band. This is not some magic wand. This is, it's rolling up your sleeves. It's different investments. It's learning new things. And it's taking some risks, you know, all in one. But we can't do this alone. It'll never be successful if it stays just in this room, in this conversation. It has to ripple out. Joe, did you think of something you really wanted to say to them that you forgot to say as like your closing statement? I'm giving you a lot of hope here, or a floor here before I turn over to the board.
No, I think we've come a long way. It was back on March 13th, I had to learn a brand new job, brand new moment in the time of day, and I think alluding back to first-year teacher versus 30-year teacher, we all had to learn it new together, and so we had to rely on everyone's strengths, weaknesses to get everybody through it. But I have seen our students come a long way and starting to move forward. Teachers, I think, are open to things as well. It's just trying to get us to a spot where we can continue to grow and kind of take our hands apart to allow us to get what we need.
Well, before I turn it over for board comments, I'll just mention to everybody, Mr. Ryle completed this communication. It should be in people's mailboxes. I know I got one. Everyone should be starting to see this. And it really it's a focus on student-centered learning. It's a thank you to our community. It lets you really get a sense of like how we're continuing to inch forward and build and grow even during challenging times. And it kind of gives you a hint to how we want to use the rest of February as a time to really talk about the state of the schools. We want to invite people to tune in to a State of the Schools message that we'll be doing at the DEX board meeting on February 26th, and to participate in the Love WC. We love to see hashtag Love WC all over this community as a way to say we are grateful for what the school community and what the community and families can all do together. So with that, we have our kind of part of the presentation is over, and I'll turn it over back to you, Mrs. Brinkman, to finalize with board comments.
Okay. Want to start? Do you have any comments?
keep doing what we're doing and making it great. I mean, we're doing so much, and I'm just in awe of what you guys do every day, because it's amazing.
No, my first day back, I was out last meeting because I did test positive for COVID. I'm back now, and I'm sure I'm not COVID-free, but I'm not contagious, and I'm.
You say this 2 hours in. Thanks, Dave.
We're glad you're back.
We are
But
glad you're back.
it's, no, I mean, and my heart goes out to those who had COVID and had it and lost family members, and, I feel lucky and blessed that I had it as mild as I've had it, that I was out of commission maybe just a few days, and then, just the recovery has been, up until now. So it's, I tested positive on the day of our last meeting. I honestly wasn't gonna go get tested because I didn't even think it was COVID. I don't go out. I mean, me being here is, even before I was isolated or quarantined, I don't go out, but, it's just, how easy this can spread. And, it was just, for me, it was just a little sinus infection, I thought, and I wasn't even gonna go test it. And my wife's like, yeah, no, you just need to go. And, sure enough, I was positive. 2 days later, my wife was positive. day after that, my 2 kids were positive. I mean, it's like that. You know? So, and I get to experience them, you know, being quarantined and learning remotely, and, you know, I get to see their teachers, how they try and interact with, you know, one person, one kid on a computer and trying to teach the other 20 in the classroom, and, you know, with the, you know, whatever the teams or meets or whatever, you know, is, you know, well, we have to tell Zach, you know, teacher hasn't updated your schedule yet, you know, so, you know, we'll just wait and just be ready, and, you know, it's a lot of, it's a lot of inconvenience for the parents, so I really can, you know, can appreciate the effort that parents are putting in. And, you know, it joking, you know, homeschooling, but I mean, it's not homeschooling. I'm not teaching them. I mean, it's still, the teachers are still teaching them in a way that's new to the kids and to the teachers. So, you know, this is all, I don't know, it's, everything's up in the air, and it's all gonna settle, and we're gonna come out better, you know, because of it. So.
And every family, every student, and every teacher has their story, and it really, it has this snowball effect sometimes, no pun intended, according to the snow that's coming, but.
Yeah, no, yeah,
But it kinda has that
I could, cause I could see outside, I can see,
Yeah.
Oh, was it snow?
I had to pull up the radar, but, I mean, it's, before I tested positive, there was always, at least for me, maybe this stigma or whatever, this scarlet letter of someone who was COVID, and you just don't really talk about it, and, you know, that's why I haven't been shy of, you know, I don't go out and broadcast, hey, I'm COVID. I mean, I just did, but I mean, you know, it's, but I mean, it's,
Still down.
well, you know, I mean, you know, it's okay to be COVID positive, and then, and help tell your story, and, you know, recovery, and help other people understand, you know, what you need to do to not get it. So,
Thank you.
yeah.
Do we need to check in with Mr. Rudy? Does he have anything he wants to add?
I also had COVID. I tested positive January 2nd. I've just been cleared to go back to work tomorrow. Although it looks like I'll be working from home again. I'm excited to get back. This was a good rejuvenation for me personally, this meeting. And it also reinforced a lot for me because I'm retired. I chose to come back to school to teaching. I'm enjoying it more than I ever did before. And I'm determined to learn all the tech and everything else, even at this age. And outdo Mr. Stahl. Since we go way back.
Thank you, Mr. Rudy. I just wanted to comment that I love when our administrators, our leaders of the district come forward and give us presentations like this. We learn a lot. It helps us understand some of the decisions that are made and why and the impact. I thoroughly enjoy learning more about the district from that level of things. It makes it easier for us to do our job, knowing how much you all depend on good decisions and being supportive. So we thank you for coming forward tonight and give us the presentation. And as always, teaching and learning has always done a great job. We look forward to the future learning sessions. Do we have any reason to go into executive session, Mrs. Delaney? You were collecting information from all of us to prepare.
And I'm still waiting on people to submit their information.
Yeah, I
That's
had
all right.
something the last couple of weeks that might have kept me from.
Yeah, absolutely. So I just was checking in to see if we had any need, and we don't. We're going to table that if you don't mind.
That works.
Let you collect additional information from the individual board members. We're doing evaluations of the superintendent. And we'll come back together on the
22nd. I keep saying 26th, but I don't mean that. That's the PI event, 22nd.
I was going to say, I thought it was the 22nd.
Yeah, it's Monday, the 22nd, yes.
We'll come back on then, and then you'll let us know if we need to have
Yes.
further conversation, or if we can move forward with. Okay. We need a motion to withdraw. Would adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Roll call.
Mr. Schaff,
Yes.
Mrs. Delaney,
Yes.
Mrs. Brinkman,
Yes.
Mr. Rudy.
Yes.
4 yes to adjourn.
Okay. We thank you for joining us this evening, and we'll see you on the 22nd.
Yes,
Thank you all.
thank you.
Thank you.
And everybody needs to be careful going home. It has been snowing quite hard for a while.
Is it snowing?